Have you ever tried to understand what your Creator says about you, your children, your rizq, or about any other aspect of your life? Where would you go to find these answers? Muslims find answers to these questions in the Qur'an. But according to a recent linguistic survey of OIC, out of some 1.7 billion Muslims now living on earth, only about 20% understand the Arabic of the Qur'an. And the percentage of those who can directly access the formidable scholarly tradition on the Qur'an or tap into the refreshing ocean of sciences of the Qur'an is even less. Another aspect of the contemporary world is the paucity of resources for serious non-Muslim seekers who attempt to find source-based, authentic information about what the Qur'an says about jihad, women, free will, and other similar concepts. A third aspect of the global realities of our time is the fact that Muslim scholarship is almost absent in the academic discourse on the Qur'an. For the last 300 years, discourse on the Qur'an in all Western languages has been dominated by those who do not believe it to be a revealed book. This discourse has gone through distinct phases of missionary, Orientalist, and academic works. But all of it is deeply flawed when examined from a Muslim perspective, because it takes the Qur'an as a human work, and so subject to the vagaries of history and human distortion. For instance, the first edition of Brill's Encyclopedia of Islam defines the Qur'an as the, quote, sacred book of the Mohammedans, unquote, and it describes the manner of its coming into the world as follows, quote, the Qur'an contains only a few and very obscure hints regarding the process of communication of the revelations. It is wrapped in a secrecy which Muhammad either could not or would not illuminate, unquote. It calls wahi, quote, inspiration, unquote, and goes on to say, quote, the Qur'an gives only a few hints about the manner of these inspirations. A veil lay over them which the Prophet either could not or would not raise completely. But we are taken further in an indirect way by the oft-reoccurring accusation of his enemies that Muhammad was possessed, Majnun, a soothsayer, kahin, a magician, sahir, for they show that in his moments of inspiration he made an impression similar to these figures well known in ancient Arabia. In Byzantine authors, we find it stated that the Prophet was epileptic, and modern psychiatrists recognize the correctness of these descriptions of his attacks, and we must, of course, leave it to them to define the exact nature of his condition, unquote. The second edition of the same work, published between 1960 and 2005, states, quote, several Medinan passages give the impression that Muhammad actively sought information from the scriptures of the Jews, since they are condemned for concealing their book from him. Some mention written copies that were shown to Muhammad or his followers. In these passages, it is not difficult to see Muhammad receiving stories and other information from various informants, including Jews and Christians, and then in moments of inspiration, reworking the material in the Quranic form. Such a view, although considered unorthodox today, is not inconsistent with some reports found in the Hadith collections and other Muslim sources, unquote. The most recent work in this category is Brill's Encyclopedia of the Qur'an, in which one finds centuries-old biases, prejudices, and distorted representations of Islam and Prophet Muhammad sprinkled like finely ground powder. For instance, the household of the Prophet, upon him blessings and peace, is described in the following manner, quote, many of the accounts of life in the Prophet's household contain detailed descriptions of the jealousies and domestic quarrels of the mothers of the believers. These reports present the Prophet's wives as petty, greedy, backbiting, and power-hungry. Most of the jealousy narratives have a sexual and emotional theme. Salama was especially prone to jealousy, unquote. These misrepresentations have had a serious impact on the non-Muslim understanding of the Qur'an and Prophet Muhammad in particular, and Islam and Muslims in general. They continue to shape how the average person in the West approaches the faith of 1.7 billion human beings who testify that there is no deity except Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Since there was no alternative, the only choice millions of researchers and scholars in universities and other research institutions had was to reference works by those who do not believe in the divine origin of the Qur'an. Responding to these urgent needs for an authentic reference work on the Qur'an, the Center for Islamic Sciences, Canada, initiated a program in 2007 to produce the first English-language encyclopedia of the Qur'an, Integrated Encyclopedia of the Qur'an, IEQ. IEQ presents all concepts, things, events, places, and persons mentioned in the Qur'an in approximately 600 articles. Conceived as a 7-volume authoritative and in-depth reference work, the Integrated Encyclopedia of the Qur'an is based on hundreds of classical sources ranging from tafsirs, hadith commentaries, lexicons, dictionaries, biographical works, and fiqh manuals. IEQ is a source-focused, scholarly text that presents accumulated wisdom and reflection on the glorious Qur'an by generations of Muslim scholars to the contemporary reader through a fully referenced text. In IEQ, readers will discover marvels of wisdom and reflection of generations found in classical sources, opening to them paths to an ocean of knowledge and scholarship on the book that is a guide and a luminous reminder to all humanity that there exists an eternal life of bliss in the shade of His mercy for all who pay heed to its message and follow the straight path. Non-Muslim readers will find in IEQ a valuable source which clearly presents Qur'anic concepts such as free will, jihad, life after death, and the like. In addition, they will discover fully referenced accounts of all persons, places, and events mentioned in the Qur'an. For academic scholars, IEQ is an indispensable research and reference source. Whether they specialize in Qur'anic studies or work in the general area of Islamic studies, researchers will find in IEQ a treasure trove of classical scholarship, hundreds of references to primary sources, and intricate discussions on the semantic network of Qur'anic concepts and themes. IEQ is a unique reference work for academic scholars who wish to engage and interact with the corpus of Muslim understanding of the book held sacred by a fourth of humanity. IEQ is a unique reference work for academic scholars who wish to engage and interact with the corpus of Muslim understanding of the book held sacred by a fourth of humanity. IEQ is an unbiased scholarly text which opens various paths to future research and presents untapped source material for scholars. It also opens new paths to understanding the Qur'an for the average reader. IEQ draws its approximately 600 entries from the thematic structure of the Qur'an, integrates 14 centuries of Muslim scholarship, and presents a breadth of authoritative knowledge about the Qur'an which is not found in any existing reference work in a Western language. IEQ is for both Muslim and non-Muslim readers. It assumes serious engagement but no prior knowledge of Arabic or the Qur'an. It employs English language lemata, and its extensive cross-referencing facilitates research. IEQ is initially being published in English, but the project envisions editions in French, German, Arabic, Urdu, Turkish, Malay, and other languages spoken in the Muslim world. The first volume of IEQ was published in 2013. Volume 2 is scheduled for 2015, and thereafter, CIS hopes to publish one volume every 18 months. The project will be completed by 2020, insha'Allah. The editors of IEQ have established a very rigorous text generation process. Authors base their texts on works from all genres dealing with the sciences of the Qur'an. After blind review by qualified scholars, the text goes through several rounds of careful editing. All references to tafsir and hadith works are double-checked to ensure accuracy. For funding, IEQ relies on individuals from around the world who want to promote a better understanding of Islam. It is a project in continuity of the great tradition of voluntary contributions to the production and dissemination of Islamic scholarship, which has existed in the Islamic tradition since the beginning of Islam. A fully dedicated IEQ fund has been established for the project. All donations go to that fund, with accounts in Canada and the United States. All transactions are kept 100% transparent. You can also support the project in one of the following ways: direct donations, sponsor a scholar. You can help the project hire a qualified scholar for a fixed period of time, 6 months to 7-year term. Sponsor an entry. Each entry goes through several steps, and each step is professionally executed. As a result, the cost of each entry depends on the length of the entry and number of words. You can sponsor an entry of your choice. You can sponsor a certain number of copies of Volume 1, which can be distributed on your behalf to influential opinion makers, non-Muslim scholars, or placed in libraries. You can also buy copies for your friends, relatives, and colleagues, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. IEQ is an international project, one of its kind. It requires your spiritual and material support. We also urge you to join the growing number of people who are seeking divine help for the project through sincere supplications. Please note, this project does not qualify for zakat funds.